welcome. Thank you so much for joining us to the Osborne Group Chat. As you know, the Osborne Group is a full-service international management consulting and training firm, and I am Karen Osborne, and I am the senior strategist of the Osborne Group. And I am joined today by the Vice President for Advancement at Emory University, located in Atlanta, Georgia, the marvelous Mary Ann Sprinkle. Hey, Mary Ann.
Hey, Karen. Nice to see you.
It is good to see you. Before I introduce Mary Ann more formally, I give you a little bit more background on her. I did want to say from both Mary Ann and I, we are grateful that you have joined us, and we both hope that you are safe and well or healing. We think that today we're going to give you some really good practical advice that you can use in your shop. And I'm going to show you why Mary Ann is the perfect person to have this conversation with. So as I said, she's Vice President for Advancement at Emory University, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. And previous to coming to Emory, Mary Ann was Associate VP for Advancement and Chief Development Officer at the University of Miami's Leonard M. Miller School of Medicine in Miami, Florida. And she was there for more than a decade. And during her tenure, the medical school, the Miller School of Medicine, raised more than $1 billion in their breakthrough campaign. So, okay, you want to know her right away, right? You want to know this woman. What I really love about Mary Ann is that in addition to her university work, she also was the Director of Development for the National Parkinson Foundation and Director of Development, Managing Director of Development for the Florida Grand Opera. So she has both experience, because so many of our listeners, Mary Ann, come from the not-for-profit world as well as the university and school world. So I just think you have a great balance that's going to be so helpful to them. And I actually wish I had known this before. I've known Mary Ann for a long time, but I didn't know this next piece. And I want to have a whole nother conversation with her about it. Mary Ann has a BA in psychology from the Stevens College of Columbia, Missouri, and an MS in counseling from the University of Oregon in Eugene, Oregon. So I would love to know how you use your psychology and your counseling as you manage your teams and you work with your donors, but we don't have time for that. So that's gonna have to be a whole nother chat on another day. As today's topic, everybody, is we're gonna continue with this notion of working in triage, transition, and transformation. Most of Mary Ann's and my conversation is going to be more about transition, but we'll touch on and we'll start with triage first. But first, Mary Ann, could you give us a little context and tell us about your structure, your teams?
Yes, so Emory's a very robust team and division with its advancement and alumni engagement office. So 309 members of that team. 119 of them are a part of my team. So I have 3 assistant vice presidents and 2 executive directors who focus on schools, colleges units, graduate schools and units, and then clinical, grateful patient, medical research. And in the midst of COVID-19, I gained 2 more teams. We have 2 more teams. We had a colleague leave, and so I gained international fundraising advancement and the regional advancement team. And there are 16 members of that regional team, right? Most of them, some of them, remotely located. And I am getting to know that team remotely. I have not met them in person, many of them. And though I know the executive director who now reports to me, we are now all working remotely.
Wow. So not only are you all working remotely, but you have people that you have to manage that you don't even have a personal relationship with. So
That's
that is a great segue into my first question. Uh, my last video chat I did with a leadership guru, Phyllis Whitethorn, and Phyllis recommended to all of us that we should have check-ins and ask about how do you feel, what are your goals for the day or the week, and what can I help you with. Now, when you're doing that with people that know you and trust you and you know and trust them, that's kind of one thing. But when you're doing it with people that you're just getting to know, that's a whole nother thing. So just tell us a little bit about how you're handling your check-ins.
Yeah, so it's a very important piece, I did watch that podcast with Phyllis because I wanted to have a sense of it, and I
No,
agree.
because you wanted to learn things from
I
the Osborne chat.
I wanted to learn things. So I agree with Phyllis, right? I think that it's important that I think she focused on managing self, and we do need to manage self. So our own well-being, our own compassion, our own health is important. I've said to several people, it's more than just showering and shaving, right? I mean, you have to be present. We have to be present. So as leaders, then the chief piece to that, and I think what you're getting at, is those check-ins. I think about them every morning as I start and every evening as I finish, right? Because those check-ins where we pay attention to the team, where our radar goes up, we look when we're having these Zoom meetings and we see those Hollywood squares, as we call them. And I worry sometimes when people are missing in action, right? I mean, we understand they have children and children who need to go to school, and we want to be sensitive to that. But I worry sometimes when we only see someone's name, when we see their headshot, and we do have to pay attention to who's present and who's not, right? And we do need to do that touch base consistently and regularly. And I would say, one story to that, when I did a one-on-one with a recent direct report, and I could tell she was just exhausted. And we had to stop the agenda. Just wasn't about the agenda, right? We focused on her. We focused on the fact that she has 2 small children, a husband who's 24/7 banking, IT, going out every day, right? And what I needed to say to her is her work day for Emory University may not be the same as someone else's work day. And that it's okay, right? It's okay. We need to release that guilt. I needed her to know it's okay to not think about, or to think about it. It's okay to think about it in different terms, right? And that everyone will be different, right? And we need to know who's different. And my team, my AVPs and the executive directors need to pay attention, and we talk about who are we worried about the most,
Yes.
right? And then who's thriving, right? Who's thriving? Some people are thriving, right? No more commuting, the Atlanta traffic, right? They're reaching people, they have their visits are up, right? Why are they thriving? And then what can we learn from that? So I think, it's sustaining that is also important. So I do worry about that a little, right?
I love that. I love the who is in trouble, who we worried about, who is thriving. And you said their visits are up, and I assume you mean their Zoom visits are up. They're
There's
not
new
out.
business.
Yes. Yeah. And then how do we learn from those who are doing so well? I love that. I think that's excellent. One of the other, I was talking to Stephanie Hull, Dr. Stephanie Hull, and she is the CEO and president of Girls Inc. nationally. And I asked her the same thing. I said, how are you handling all the check? Because she has all these affiliates all over the country. So she has all these CEOs that she has to worry about. Like you have your associate vice presidents. And she said, Karen, one of the things is that I know that there's fear out there, that people are worried about when we actually come back, when we go to this next stage, the transition stage, and people start coming back, they're worried. She said, so one of the things I'm doing is figuring out ways to reconnect people to the mission so that they've got this worry over here, but then they've got the bigger picture. And I know you've done something really intriguing and cool that you had to pivot on and working on connecting people to the mission and the vision and the work. Could you share that with us?
Yes. So I think Stephanie's right as well. So you've brought some smart people together to talk about this, right? That the big picture is important. And I would say that for Emory University, that Emory's bigger picture has never been bigger, right? Mm-hmm. Because we have a new president starting on August 1st. We are in the leadership phase of a campaign, a mega campaign. Emory's claim to fame on campaigns is that we have never launched a campaign that we have not been in a recession. So we just have always had our campaigns start during recessions. Mm-hmm. The piece that is important to the bigger picture is that pre-COVID, we had embarked upon a culture project, a significant culture project, not the press gainy scoring, although we did that too. This was an extensive analysis of our team, the entire division, with anecdotal information, with open-ended questions, with compiling data, lots of data, right? And from that, we are now focusing on mission, vision, and values is the first tenet. Mm-hmm. And today is our final day to accept nominations for those who will be a part of the working group that will focus on mission, vision, and values, right? The fundamentals, right? The chief important pieces to be successful at our work, right?
And how are you going to do these task forces remotely?
We're going to do them remotely, Karen. I think that one of the things that we're learning as we do a lot of Zoom calls is that there are lots of things we can do with Zoom calls. We can break off into groups, which I think
small groups. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And Emory didn't know about that until we recently did one with the EAB, and he just spun us off into groups, and we had to discuss something for 10 minutes and come back, and it worked beautifully, right? So we're getting better and better at that. And so
did you guys think about, should you not do it until you could all physically be together?
No, we have to keep going, Karen.
Gotta keep going.
We have to keep going. We have to not only on that mission, vision, and values, but clarifying roles and responsibilities is number 2, right? So when people say, I don't really understand with the regional team what my role is now, well, we've got to get past that, right? We need to all understand our roles, right? Yeah. And now is the time when we're all, remotely connected to have those conversations. And then the third is developing leadership. at all levels. And I'm actually overseeing that working group. So it's a privilege, right? To be able to lead that group. And I hope people nominate, it's like all the good people nominate themselves to be on it, right?
Oh, that would be wonderful if they actually nominated themselves. That that is awesome. You know, you mentioned a few minutes ago that the goals for Emory are bigger than they've ever been. And I am very interested, and I know our audience is, on how you're dealing with performance measures, both now and how you see them going forward. Are you changing them? Are you throwing them out? What are you doing?
Oh, that's a very good Karen Osborne question. So our COO says our goals haven't changed, but our projections have. Now, I have not changed the projections. Our goals are intact. So our overarching, lofty, philanthropic goal for the year and for each of the units that make up that number, not changing that number. We have 4 months to go, Karen, because our fiscal year ends end of August 31st. And true, we are a part of a big system and a healthcare system. We own 11 hospitals. So we have raised $35 million toward COVID initiatives. So we don't like the reason why we have, but we have. And so those numbers are up in terms of Emory Healthcare's goals and numbers. But we're not changing the other.
So how are you helping? So if you're not going to change your goals and your team, some of them people you don't even know really well yet, your team has to keep moving. Just can you give me some examples of how, like one of the great goals always is visits. You know, you've got to be out and about and you've got to make X number of visits. And now the world has changed. So how are you handling that?
Yes, so visits are up. I mean,
Up.
30-40%, right? Because
no, not right. How did you do that?
So, but virtual visits is a very intriguing proposition, right? So Emory was a little behind the curve on virtual visits. In fact, last fiscal year, we wanted to have prospect management agree that we could have a virtual visit. We did a signing of a gift agreement with a donor in Virginia, and we did it virtually, and we toasted the gift. It was $1 million, right? And we wanted to count it as a virtual visit, and we were told no. And all of that has changed. So we now count virtual visits. We use the Karen Osborne definition of it because it needs to be purposeful, right? It needs to be scheduled and clear and purposeful. It's a purposeful initiative. It's not a surprise. It's not a call in or see if we can catch someone that day. They know why we are calling, why we have that virtual visit.
Nice.
So virtual visits are up.
Wow, that is really amazing.
They count.
Did you train on it? Did you train on this or?
So we probably have more to learn, right? We have one colleague who is really good at it. She actually lives remotely, so she's a regional team member. And so we're having her teach us how she's doing it. Why is she successful? Even with a cold call, right? How do you reach someone in your portfolio whom you have not spoken to before or had a connection to before? How do you set up that virtual visit, right? And last week we had a virtual visit with a 90-year-old donor. So we do not want to discount that everyone is participating in this, right?
That's beautiful. And this notion that an older person wouldn't even, be comfortable with virtual visits. So that is awesome. And then and the team is learning from their experiences, sharing their experiences.
They are. And then so I am a big believer in supporting two joint virtual visits. So, for instance, we had a new colleague. She started virtually, right? She began as the Chief Development Officer for the business school, and we did a virtual visit together with our fourth largest donor to the university to
Wow.
introduce her to them, right? And we're both on the call, right? We're both there. We're encouraging that maybe one of the ways we learn is that we do it together, right?
I love that. I love that. I love that. I love that. Marianne, this has been such a wonderful, wonderful chat. And you've given us so many concrete things to take away and to think about as we work forward. And I know that we might get some questions coming in, and if I may follow up with you, and if somebody calls in and asks a question, I'll just say, let's see what Marianne thinks. But this has been awesome. Is there one thing that you would like our audience to take away? Because you've talked about so many really big ideas. Is there any one thing you'd like to leave us with?
Well, I'd like to leave the audience with the fact that we know that these are unprecedented times, and certainly, as we've discussed, we recognize and we need to pay attention to how people are doing, how our colleagues are doing. But I've thought a lot about this, and it's my job as a leader to continue to do this. We also need to have and continue to have a little fun along the way, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, we've done a couple of things. So one is that I have an electronic newsletter that I do weekly that I call Marianne's Musings. And you've been in that newsletter. We've shared some of the Karen Osborne and Osborne Group reminders and tips and about engagement and what do we do in the time of crisis and what can we learn from the Great Recession. So you've been a part of Musings, and I've also introduced my 93-year-old mother, 93 and a half, she says, to my team, right, to have a human touch, photos of my mother, stories of my mother, right? And it's hit a nerve, I think, with some of my colleagues and who've sent me pictures of their mothers and
Nice.
And just that connection. And we try to add some humor to it. But the other thing that we've done is that on one of our team meetings, which had no agenda, I brought two goats, G-O-A-T-S, to the meeting. Nellie and Edith. I had read about it in, of all things, the New York Post, that corporations have been doing this because we're all having all these Zoom meetings, right? And that you can go to sites where they have sanctuaries for animals and animal rescue. I made a donation, and so it's a Goats 2 meeting. It's a Goats 2 meeting.
I love it.
And I watched as my teammates brought their children into the picture to see the goats, and some people recorded it and took photos. And so we have to keep that alive as well.
Yes, we do. That is a fabulous, fabulous example. Goats to meeting. I love it. Marianne, thank you so much for being with us. And thank all of you out there. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you got as much out of it as I did, because I thought this was great. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.